welcome to another episode of the Technicals podcast. This show is all about interviewing people in different technical fields to be able to learn from them and hear their insights and advice. Today, I am joined by Chuck Grimmett. How about you tell a little bit about yourself for everyone?
Sure. Hi, I'm Chuck Grimmett, and right now I work at Automatic on the WordPress.com special projects team.
Okay. So, how did you kind of start and begin into this world, into the programming stuff?
Sure. It goes all the way back to seventh grade for me. I went to a public school, and one of my teachers uh, asked the class one day, "Does anyone have any interest in like learning how to make websites? Gonna put together an after school program one day a week and teach how to build websites." And I thought that sounds pretty cool. I knew one of my cousins did that, and but otherwise I didn't know very much about it. So I sat in on this, and it was very basic, but it was like using um, Dreamweaver to build basic HTML pages, and then I just kept up with it after that. By the time I got to high school, the high school that I went to was a public school, but it was somewhat unique in that they hired students at the high school to actually run the website and stuff like that. So my closest friend and I got hired by the school. We just kind of worked after classes. So classes ended at 3 o'clock. We worked from like 3 to 5, occasionally later, but mostly just 3 to 5, doing web development work. And the site was all PHP based mostly. And so I started picking up PHP, which is how I ended up eventually getting into WordPress, right? Which is primarily all PHP based. And I kept going from there. Every summer, there's not much that needs to be updated in the website in the summer when school's out. So, but we kept going in. They agreed to keep paying us, and so for 3 summers in a row, we decided to just do learning projects and tear down the entire website and rebuild it from scratch. It just kind of this was at the point where CSS3 was just starting to come out. It wasn't fully supported yet, so we were trying to figure out what things in CSS we could support, and just brainstorming ideas. It was super fun. I mean, it seems like I have a lot of fond memories of learning stuff in high school those summers. That's how I got started.
Great, awesome. So from there, going into college, did you kind of know then, this is what I want to do and go into it with that goal?
No, not at all. In fact, in college, I ended up studying economics and mathematics. I did not do computer science, and I actually thought that I was dead set on going to get a PhD in mathematics, and that was my plan. That was what I was going to do. So for 4 years, I did very, very little web development work, and unfortunately, that was at the time where there was some pretty radical changes in both JavaScript and PHP. So by the time I got out of college and went into the workforce, I decided, short story, I decided not to go get a PhD. I got a job offer right out of college. In fact, before I finished college, and I decided, you know what? I can always go back and try to apply to PhD programs later if I really want to, but I feel like I've been given a gift of getting an unsolicited job offer. I should just take it and see what things are like out there. And if I want to come back and do a PhD, I can. But after about a week of not being in college and having classes and realizing that I can work, I'm getting paid, and I have my evenings free. I don't have to do homework and study, etc. I can just learn whatever I want and have fun. I decided I'm never going back, and academia is not for me. So at that point, I had kept up some of my WordPress. I got into WordPress, way back in high school because I wanted to build a blog. Um, I've been blogging now for about 15 years, and I wanted to build a blog. WordPress was starting to get popular then, and I kept up the WordPress skills, and I went to in this first job. I wasn't really hired in what you might consider like a full-time technical role. I was doing it was like a kind of a catch-all position. Sometimes I was doing some social media work, sometimes I was doing some website work, sometimes I was doing some project management work, but um, I ended up just continuing to take on anything web related that came my way and learning more in the evenings, doubling down on my WordPress knowledge. And long story short, I got another job offer a couple years later from a company that we had hired to help rebuild our website and like move a lot of archives over to another platform. Um, I spent a lot of time like working with them on this project and brainstorming some things they could do with some other clients. Ended up getting, and then I was doing some freelance work for them as well. Freelance work at night outside of my regular job, and that ended up getting me a full time job offer with this other company, which was a kind of a consulting firm style tech company. They build lots of websites, some in ASP.NET and then some in WordPress. And I ended up getting hired to do 50% project management and 50% WordPress development. It was only 50% WordPress development because they didn't have enough clients at that time to be like 100% WordPress. I spent about half my time doing that. But I ended up helping them build out that WordPress offering and streamlining some of that process. Um, and I consider that to be like my first real full time like technical development job.
Hmm. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, so what does it kind of look like? You said you're working with a lot of like WordPress stuff. Is that actually coding a lot of it, like hard coding?
Yeah, I think we have to put ourselves in the mind frame of what WordPress was like then. Gutenberg, the
Hmm,
main page builder, wasn't around yet, right? So
hmm,
um, when you are making right now, if you want to make templates in WordPress, you can almost do the entire template in Gutenberg in the full site editor in the GUI. But
hmm,
back then you couldn't. It was mostly you would be writing PHP templates and adding style sheets and adding JavaScript.
hmm,
Um, you would, of course, you could put content in the editor, but if you were actually like laying out a site, you had to code the template yourself. So that I was
hmm,
doing quite a bit of that.
hmm, hmm. Okay, okay, nice, nice. So you kind of mentioned like that's where you were at working kind of like half on that WordPress kind of at that like consulting type place, you know.
Mhm.
How did you like getting to that point? Was most of your coding experience as you were growing in that on the job, or were you kind of on the side as well, exploring around and doing projects outside of stuff like that?
It was definitely both. I did a
Hmm,
lot of stuff on the side and a lot of stuff at work, learning on the job. Because I was doing some project management as well, I learned very quickly that um, when you're communicating with clients and you're setting the timeline, if you want to learn something on the job, you can just increase the timeline a little bit to give yourself a little
hmm,
bit of that wiggle room to learn while you're doing it. Um,
hmm,
so yeah, and sometimes that makes you hold your feet to the fire as well because you've agreed to a client that you need to have this done in a month, right? So you're really forcing yourself to learn on the job. But yeah, I was young and um, I didn't have any kids yet, so I was
hmm,
doing as much as I could outside of work on the side as well. Just mostly having fun, I would say.
hmm, hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's kind of a consistent thing that I'm seeing with a lot of programmers is that it's like I'm just having fun a lot of it. It's just
Yeah,
like
you're
exploring around.
learning. I I mean, I think there's a lot of overlap with people that like to do this kind of work and people who have like a tinkerer mindset.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, for sure. So, kind of like going back a little bit, you said you were in college for mathematics and then you just
Hmm.
kind of got that sudden offer. Did they just come to you and just find you, or how exactly
Uh,
did that happen?
it was from a place that I had done an internship in.
Hmm.
The very particular circumstances were that um, I was doing an internship. I knew a lot of what they were doing in this particular role at that time because I was working for um, the person whose role I ended up taking over. And
Hmm.
this person needed to leave pretty suddenly, and it the timeline lined up with um, when my final semester would have started. I got the job offer saying, "Hey, like, would you be able to start early? Like, I know you technically don't graduate. Would you? Is there any possibility of graduating early?" And there was. I had enough credits to graduate early, and I thought, "All right, let's just go. Let's give it a try." I moved to the East Coast from. I was living in the Midwest and moved to the East Coast right after Christmas and started like January 2nd or 3rd.
Oh wow, wow. Okay. What was
And
it?
I've been out here in New York ever since.
Wow, wow. Yeah, that's cool. What was it kind of like adjusting then? I know you said that you much preferred having a job and working rather than academia and that sort of world.
Yeah.
But did you feel like you were pretty like prepared and ready in that job, or did you kind of feel like a lot of it was like, okay, I have to learn this just by on the job?
A lot of it was on the job learning. I felt prepared in that I had a lot of leeway with being able to. I was in an environment where I could say I don't know, but give me a couple hours and I'll let you
Mm,
know whether or not I think it's reasonable. Um, it was the staff wasn't very large, so yeah, I I'm just super thankful that I was given a lot of flexibility. I was able to
mm,
learn on the job there. And I don't ever recall feeling stressed about like not knowing something because there was a lot of humble being able to be humble and saying, yeah, I don't know this, but I can learn. um and you can always couple that with uh saying, all right, I don't know this, I can learn, and then come back a couple hours later with, here are three things that I researched, and here is what I
mm,
think the path forward might be, and just kind of getting some consensus, getting feedback on that, and being very open if you're, you've got it wrong, and say, well, actually, I did some research here, and I don't think this is possible for these reasons. And when you do
mm,
that, you can say, not only can you say, I don't think it's possible, but uh, it's that blow doesn't come as hard when you can offer an alternative solution, right?
mm, mm.
Trying to
Yeah.
meet that end goal. I think I learned a lot of that sort of stuff in doing like project management. You use a lot of those
Mm,
same techniques when trying to like pitch something to a client and sell things. Um, there's I think there's always a joke that like programmers don't have any people skills.
mm,
Um, so I feel like I'm in a position where I've got a lot of the technical chops. I'm not the strongest programmer, but the way that I make up for that is that I also have a lot of people skills and communication skills, and so
mm,
it's very easy for me to talk to clients, understand what they want, figure out a solution, architect the solution, and then get a bunch of people to help me build it.
mm,
And
mm,
being able to also come in and say, all right, I can read the code. I understand what's going on here. I can participate in some of the debugging when something's going wrong. Um, that kind of gets me in the door of both the sales, project management, account management people, but also with the technical people too, because I feel like I have a decent understanding of both trades.
Yeah, yeah. And was that kind of like moving forward into your career, was that more of a focus for you? Was less of like, I just want to be writing code 24, like whatever, 8 hours a day, and more of like, I want to kind of have that balance?
Yeah, it was. I think when I'm looking back at all of my positions, I've tried to keep that balance because that is my comparative advantage, right?
Hmm.
Um, I at that consulting firm, I would often uh, go along on sales pitches, and what I'd be doing on the fly there is listening to what the client's looking for, and being the check with the salespeople to say, yeah, that's possible, or no, that's not possible, and like here's how. And uh, I think I often got picked for that instead of some of the more senior technical people because I had more of the people skills. I could talk
Hmm.
to the clients and not look like I'd rather be writing code all day.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I tried to double down in what my comparative advantage is. I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a really kind of important thing. An important point is remembering, like realizing, looking inward and being like, okay, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? And kind of like
Right.
building your career almost around that, where it's like, I'm not just going to say, well, I like coding, and so I guess I'm just going to be a front end developer and just write like in HTML and CSS and JavaScript and all that just all day long. Um, and you
Right.
you kind of
Right.
have that balance, to be able to figure out. It's like, okay, well, maybe I am the guy who can't have a good conversation with somebody, and I'm just in the back, or maybe I'm the guy who's on the front, or maybe a mix of both. So yeah,
Right.
yeah, no,
And sometimes I see the folks that have other interests as well tend to leverage those wherever they can. So if a developer has a bit of design background, and they can that one thing that helps them do is when they're implementing designs on the front end, if something if the designs don't quite match what's possible, they're able to make the decisions themselves about how to shift it and make it still look good for the client, right? And not have
mm,
to say, "Oh, this doesn't work. Go back to design. Wait another week for turning around comps, etc." But like making those decisions on the fly, shipping it.
mm, yeah, yeah. And I know you kind of mentioned before in passing that how you kind of got that job right there was that you were already doing freelance work with them on the side. How
Mm-hmm.
did you kind of get into that freelancing world, make those connections, and start doing that work?
Um, by I had that particular connection because we had chosen that firm to do some work for the company I was working at the time. And usually when stuff like that happens, like that firm like will come out and travel. And when people are traveling, you tend to go to dinner with them, have other conversations. And so I was just curious about what some of their clients were, and what they were doing. And sometimes I couldn't help myself. I would just pitch ideas. Say, "Oh, what if you did X, Y, Z?" And they're like, "You know how to do that?" I was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" Um,
Mm,
and it started really small. Like it would start with one tiny project. You ship that, and you ship it on time, and it looks good. And they'll give you another one, and you keep like building bigger and bigger and bigger. I didn't ever do like tons of freelance clients, and I
mm,
never was never a full time freelancer. It was always like outside of my regular job. But um, I would say I got into that just by being curious and listening to what types of particular problems people had, offering some
mm,
solutions, and then when I got the opportunity, shipping it as fast as I could.
mm, yeah, yeah. Do you think that that's a good and um kind of like a good path for a programmer to go down? Is that freelancing? Like, is that like,
Um,
how possible is that even for somebody like, how many years of experience or practical stuff, like, to get into kind of that freelancing world? What do you think about that?
sure, it's hard to say. I think um, it depends on what margins you're trying to compete on, right? Are you
Mm,
trying to compete on Upwork? Because if so, you're probably not going to compete very well there. There's so many people, they're very talented. So you're a small fish in a gigantic pond filled with other fish, right? And a lot of other fish that are bigger than you. But if you come across opportunities that other people don't know about and aren't bidding on, for example, there's local companies in your community that have particular problems, you learn about them, pitch building a website for XYZ. They may not be putting stuff like that on big marketplaces like Upwork. They might just take a chance with someone they know, right? I think it depends on, where you're trying to compete there. It's hard for me to say whether or not that's a viable path now. I feel like it probably is, but it's been 10, 11, 12 years since I've done something like that. So, and the ecosystem has changed a lot, I would say. At least my perception is that it's changed a lot. Maybe it hasn't, but I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of moving on, you're at this like consulting type place. Where did you kind of go from there?
From there, I got another job offer from doing freelance work. In this case, I ended up actually working at Praxis. I worked at Praxis for a couple of years. And at one point, Praxis split into Crash and Praxis. Crash is no longer around, but I was on the team that went over to the Crash side of things, and I was there for a couple years, and then after that, right before the pandemic, like a week before the pandemic, is when I decided I wanted to change, and I went to Automatic.
Yeah.
What I was doing at Praxis and Crash. So at Praxis, I got my start there I built one of the early versions of their portal, the the learning management system there, and I built that on WordPress initially. I think it might still be on WordPress. I don't know. It's changed a lot since I was there, but I built that. But then I also spent a lot of my time writing actual curriculum that folks at Praxis were going through. So it wasn't a 100% technical role, but my technical skills helped a lot there. At a small startup like that, people tend to play all different kinds of roles, right? The solutions that I came up with tended to be more technical in nature, in that I did a lot of like, how can we automate certain workflows? How can we build these tools? Then when we split and went over to split between Praxis and Crash, and I went the Crash route, that's when I was doing more development most of the time. We were building that Crash platform in Ember.js, and I wasn't the lead developer there. That was Dave Losmer. But I ended up working on that with Dave, and Ilio's another developer we had in the team. That there were three of us, and we were spending the majority of our days writing code, sometimes doing user interviews, sometimes other things, but mostly just trying to build that platform out. And sometimes building marketing tools too. Like I built the tool that the career matcher quiz. It was a quiz that would then, after you do like 40 questions, and at the end of those 40 questions, it would sort you into one of the buckets of whether you should be, what kind of role you should try to apply yourself to based on your interests.
Yeah. So just a lot of kind of odd projects and doing a lot of things, which I think I gather that's the nature of working at a small startup like that, is you are kind of jumping around.
And I also realize that for myself, if I'm doing one thing all the time, I tend to sort of get bored. So I tend to gravitate toward variety, and that's very much the kind of role I have at Automatic right now.
Yeah. So kind of speaking of that, what does your job now at Automatic, what does that kind of look like?
So I lead an engineering team on the special projects team, and the special projects team helps build and maintain WordPress sites for a lot of like interesting and influential people. There's some really big WordPress sites that we manage, and we are like experts on WordPress. One quick thing about the difference between Automatic and WordPress is that the same person who co-founded WordPress, the project, the open source project, also founded Automatic.
Hmm.
And Automatic runs WordPress.com, the hosting platform, which is distinct from the open source software, but there's a bit of a connection between the two. And the team that I'm on, we build WordPress sites and we maintain WordPress sites. So the engineering team is responsible primarily for technical debugging and technical maintenance of these sites. So right now I lead a team of I think 6 engineers, and there are 3 engineering teams on our special projects division, and we're spread out all across the world. So the folks that I am the team that I lead is primarily US based, not exclusively, but primarily like Eastern to Pacific time zones. And our variety of work there changes day to day. Sometimes we're on longer term projects. Sometimes it's 1 to 2 hour quick turnaround type things. And we maintain roughly 400 sites right now. So what comes in constantly changes week after week from what is getting prioritized with these roughly 400 sites.
Okay, wow. Yeah. So how do you kind of like the role of more of like a manager? You said you kind of have that like people skill type of thing. Do you do you enjoy do this more sort of managerial role more than kind of the technical, or is it just like different or what?
Um, yeah, I quite like it. I mean, I get to interact with people that I like and respect every day. I'm still learning because when I have the time and space to, I can continue building things, go drop down as technical as I would like. Um, but one other thing that I tend to do quite a bit is I tend to hop on client calls, and I take a technical role on client calls quite a bit. And sometimes other engineers don't feel comfortable doing that, so that's a place that has seemed to work out pretty well for me, and tend to do quite a bit of communication, um, either between teams at Automatic or communication out to clients and back. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I quite like the role that I'm in.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
I would
yeah.
say there's quite a bit of flexibility.
Yeah. That's great, kind of having that option of like, okay, how what exactly do I want to be working on and stuff like that. How is it kind of working as a team and trying to organize different engineers and all of that? How does that exactly work and go and all of that?
Sure. Well, it depends on whether you are a product team and everyone is focusing on building one product, or whether you're more of support style. Because support
Hmm.
style, your work tends to be more granular. Like there's usually only 1 or maybe 2 people on a particular issue. There's not a lot of coordination that needs to happen there.
Hmm.
Um, when I was at Crash, there were 3 to 4 of us working all on the same thing. So we had to do quite a bit of coordination to make sure that we weren't overwriting each other's stuff, and
Hmm.
that our solutions were kind of consistent across the board. Yeah, it's a little more granular when you're handling support related things, but we do one thing that's a little bit different about my work at Automatic versus work elsewhere is that um, it's a global company. There's roughly 2,000 employees in uh, something like 70 countries right now. So we span across the globe, and there's just there's a lot of things you have to consider when you are doing handoffs across time zones and you have high time zone coverage. but also we all tend to primarily work in English, but
Mm,
English is definitely not everyone's first language, right?
mm,
So um, you've got to be cognizant of that. And also, when you're handing stuff off across time zones, you can very rarely actually get on face-to-face calls with people. It's
mm,
primarily all written communication. So nuances get dropped that right now we're probably picking up on our mannerisms, facial expressions, etc. You don't have any of that in written communication. So
mm,
uh, you have to adapt your communication style for that. Um, we we work primarily in Slack for direct, immediate communication, but for
mm,
things that are not direct and immediate, we have this system called P2, and it's actually a system of hundreds of WordPress blogs all connected together, and most of our internal communication is all in the written blog medium.
mm.
So uh, I kind of blog all day, right? um, we document all of our decisions in blogs. People reply. We take feedback there, and it's all internal. Wait, you can't access it if you don't work outside of Automatic. You can
Mm.
use P2, the system. We have that as a product that we sell, um, but these are all private blogs that only people who work at Automatic can access. We've What's one really cool thing is that they've been using that for like 16 years. The company just turned 20 years old, and they had something different before that, but there's like 16 years of company history that's all searchable and indexed. So if you want to understand why something was built a certain way, you can almost certainly find it, which is really cool
Oh.
because there's just vast history documentation. Um, and that means that when you hit a problem, uh, the first thing you should probably do is search the P2 system, because chances are someone's already run into that problem in the last 20 years and they've written
Mm.
it. They've written what the solution is. So it's amazing treasure trove of knowledge we have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's, I think, documentation and stuff like that. I mean, that's why like GitHub and those sort of softwares and all that have like pull requests and all of those sort of things, and the like
Mm-hmm.
commit names and everything like that, is to try and communicate and all of that. But I've heard from some people kind of a principle of like, you're not really writing your code and going through that whole process to try and make it work. You're trying to write it so that other people can understand. Like, that's your primary goal as a programmer, is
and
to.
and not just other people, but you 6 months from now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, because you're probably going to touch the same thing, right? And you 6 months from now, you're not going to remember why you wrote it that way. So you've got to leave really nice comments. You got to make it readable. Um, there's so much you can do to automate that too, right? You can there's really good linting frameworks to make sure things are consistent. You set up your rules one way and it is auto applied. um, in the PHP world, we have PHP code sniffer and sets of rules that go along with PHP code sniffer, and we've got very particular sets in the WordPress community about everything has to be done this particular way.
Hmm.
And that just means that uh, we've got some pretty nice consistency across uh, this gigantic code base.
Hmm, hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. So, kind of like looking back at like your whole career and everything that you've learned, what's kind of like some just like general advice or principles and stuff like that that you would tell somebody, and maybe who's in the field or wants to get in it or something like that?
Especially when you are just starting out. Um, like there, I would say default to saying yes to things rather than defaulting to say no. There's a lot of when people tend to like get to the middle of their career and they get to the point where they feel like they can start giving advice. A lot of advice they start to give is like guard your time, say no, etc. And that's really great when you are in the middle of your career, but that works out very poorly when you're, I think, at the beginning of your career. Saying yes to as much as possible, taking on things in order to learn,
Hmm.
is really great. I mean, you probably have no clue what your life is going to be like 5 years from now. Saying yes to a lot of things opens up a vast network of possibilities. Like when you start to think about charting possible paths, the more things you say yes to now lead to very different results later, right? The more things you say no to now trim off that set of possibilities. You could end up pigeonholing yourself if you say, like, oh, I just want to stick with, I don't know, node frameworks, right? Like, do we know that node is going to be the big thing in 10 years or 5 years? I don't know. The other thing I would say is instead of only doubling down on writing code, not the AI tools write the best code now, but they are improving a lot. And what is something that AI can't do? AI right now is not really great at like listening to the particular needs of a client and translating that into what needs to be built and like building those relationships. So the more you can learn now about how to foster relationships, how to build relationships, how to communicate really well, I don't think that is something that is going to be circumvented by AI in the immediate future. Whereas like month by month now, AI tools are just getting so much better at helping people write code that like, yeah, I mean, when you get to be like the top 5% of your field, like you're probably going to be fine anyway. But when you're just starting out, like you're not the world's best programmer, like you're not the world's expert on XYZ. There are certain things that AI tools can probably do faster than you. There's certainly things that AI tools can do faster than I can, especially they can adjust all of a code base's documentation and understand it in some way better than you and I can at the, in a matter of seconds. Whereas it takes some time to read through all of that and understand it, but it can't step away from the computer and build relationships with other people, which will help you long-term in your career. Right. So like, I think finding that good balance between like getting really good at your particular field, but also pretty good at the interpersonal communication aspect, I think is going to be quite beneficial. I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that kind of wraps everything up then for this. Thanks so much for being on. It's been great.
Yeah, of course. Cool.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well,
very nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Thanks for
nice
having
to meet you as well. Yep, of course. All right. Well, that finishes up this episode. So I'm just going to end it here. Bye.